All right, let's do this. Good afternoon, Colorado. I am Jonas Durham, Senior Manager of the Colorado Broadband Office, and we've got BEAD coming up right around the corner. I believe we are looking to open up our BEAD application window next week, September 3rd. And with that comes a lot of exciting opportunities, a lot of information that we need to start sharing, and a lot of expectations that should be set. And so the first one we wanted to start talking about is the potential for our grantees to need to partner with CDOT for their projects, any kind of permitting or right-of-way access that might be needed, and to make sure that everyone is well aligned on what that process looks like, clear up any miscommunications, and really just bring everybody together to be able to ask questions and make sure that everyone is crystal clear on what is needed and how to prepare for working with CDOT and the CBO when it comes to your BEAD projects. So I want to thank everyone for taking time today to go through this webinar. And really the intent is to go through that process and allow everyone to ask questions to CDOT. We've got some incredible folks from the CDOT team on this call today, starting with Julie Constant, who is the Region 5 Transportation Director. Someone who I've been working with for several years now, one of my favorite people at CDOT, very, very knowledgeable. So Julie, thank you so much for taking time to meet with us and all of our mutual stakeholders on what this process looks like, what they should expect, how to best prepare, and anything else that they might need to know. So Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you. If there's anybody else you'd like to introduce from your team, please feel free. But thanks again. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jonas. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for being here today. Prior to being the regional director for Southwest and South Central Colorado, I was a traffic engineer, and traffic engineers oversee a lot of the permitting aspects. So that's why I've been intimately involved with these processes. Also with us today is Bob Pfeiffer. He is the deputy over operations that our ITS and fiber groups also run up to. So if I get questions that I need some help with, he will be my phone friend. And I believe if you guys have any questions that you want to ask along the way as I'm presenting, feel free to raise a hand. Lauren, I think, is paying attention to the chat box, or throw a question in the chat box, and we'll make sure we do our best to get those questions answered. So today I'm going to share some information about CDOT's processes for installing fiber in the right-of-way, some details and some helpful hints that hopefully will help your projects be successful working within our CDOT right-of-way. Our goal today, next slide, Lauren. So our goal today is really to educate our stakeholders on two things. First, CDOT's permitting process for all work within our right-of-way. And second, the agreement option that is available for stakeholders who wish to build fiber within CDOT's right-of-way and compensate CDOT with in-kind infrastructure. Then we'll hand it over to the broadband office to talk about their funding application process and some frequently asked questions there as well. Next slide. So all work within the CDOT right-of-way must be permitted. Permits are issued through our regional permit offices. So as I mentioned, I was a regional traffic engineer. We have a permit office there, and we have a permit office with all of our other 4 regions within the state as well. Specifically, though, for a longitudinal buried fiber installation, there is a monetary payment for the use of our right-of-way and for the time it takes to issue those permits. This is a simplified process that has been adopted as of December 2023, and the permitting fee process is less resource dependent and provides a faster turnaround for folks wishing to build their own fiber infrastructure in our CDOT right-of-way. The timeline to issue a permit does vary, but typically we strive to get those permits issued between 3 and 4 months to start the process to the completion of that process. The first step of the process, as you can see from the diagram, is that you need to apply for a fiber communication permit. Typically, within 45 days of that time frame, your permit documentation is reviewed. If all is accurate, thorough, and complete, you will have a permit issued within 45 days. You will pay a one-time application fee when you sign that permit. Then, depending on the complexity of the work you're performing in the CDOT right-of-way, the construction phase or the implementation part of your permit, the timeline will vary. Every year, though, on January 1st, your fiber communication permits, you will be invoiced for your property use surcharge for permits that are installations of longitudinal buried fiber infrastructure. CDOT will aggregate all the permits issued for fiber installations in our right-of-way by permittee, so you will receive one invoice each year that lists all of your permits and the annual fees due. Okay, next slide. So the most important thing to remember, that is all work within CDOT's right-of-way and work within interstate routes, US routes, Colorado state routes, or CDOT maintained roadway requires a permit to be in place prior to the start of any work. This would include things like potholing. So if you need to apply for additional permits ahead of your installation permits, please do plan that accordingly. Any pre-work needs to be permitted as well, like I just said, for potholes. For example, if you need to permit work within the right-of-way for potholing, then you'll use the information you find out from potholing to put that together for your fiber installation permit. When you are a first-time permittee, CDOT does also require that you become an approved permittee in our system. That allows CDOT to keep accurate records. If you have not worked with CDOT before, it will be helpful if you have your company's W-9 and a certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State handy. You will submit those two documents the first time you try and apply for a permit to become an approved permittee. Our region permit office will review those documents and they will confirm that the company name matches exactly what's on the W-9 and that their certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State is also in place. Another helpful tip is to review where your work will be occurring. So if you're building within Forest Service land, Bureau of Land Management land, or other federal lands or sovereign Indian nations, which we have in my region, you also need to make sure that you're reaching out to those agencies to understand any requirements that those agencies may have as well, because you may have to meet additional requirements outside of just the CDOT requirements. Next slide. So when you do apply for a permit, you will need to provide all the documents that are listed on this slide. So first, a cover letter that is on your company's letterhead. This should spell out in detail exactly what the proposed work you plan to do within the CDOT right-of-way is. You should also include your work that is related to or funded by CBO funding resources. And please be as specific as you can. So paint the whole picture in your cover letter of everything that's going on and all the funding pieces, especially the CBO funding pieces that are tied to it. Second, you need to include a plan set. The more accurate and thorough your plan set is, the better. In all honesty, that is what usually slows down permitting processes within Region 5 and the other regions because of back and forth time on a plan set. So the better the detail on the plan set, the better the plan set, the quicker the process will go for everybody. You need to include all the locations of planned work. You need to include plans and profiles, utility callouts, right-of-way lines, mile markers, those types of details. All the details that our permit office would need in order to quickly review the process, the permit. You will also need to provide a certificate of insurance, and it must list CDOT as insured, additionally insured. You will also need to include a traffic control plan or a method of handling traffic or an MHT. This is required for all work within our right-of-way and must conform to the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD. This is important to ensure that we have consistent, safe traffic controls in place for much of the work happening within the CDOT right-of-way. CDOT staff, maintenance teams are all very well versed on MUTCD and will be paying very close attention when you're actually out there in the field installing the fiber to make sure you're complying with the MUTCD as well as the MHT that had been submitted. And then lastly, you will provide the contact information for your third-party inspector. And one of the most important things for you to remember is that when you're submitting an application is you need to submit an accurate, complete, and detailed application. If you have missing components or the permit office has to come back to you and ask for more information or more clarification or additional documents that may have been missed in your initial submission, it will start a review process over and the timeline over. So you want to make sure your first application is accurately completed as possible and detailed as possible. It will help you to have an permit issue faster, and submitting partial documents or incomplete applications will require follow-up. Permits will not be reviewed and issued until a complete application is received. And you need to plan accordingly because this is the most common issue we have that delays our permits.
Hey, Julie, I've got a question about that. When we talk about incomplete applications or documents that are missing, do you guys see any patterns or common documents that seem to be forgotten that people should be aware of or pay extra attention to?
Yeah, in all honesty, the insurance certificate seems to be a common one that people tend to forget. And then where we often see revisions needing to come into place, Jonas, is like I mentioned on the plan set as well as the MHTs or the traffic control plans. So just paying real close attention to both of those items as well is key.
No, that's super helpful. Thank you, Julie. I've also heard, yeah, traffic plans seem to be an issue. So that's a great reminder for the audience. Thanks again.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions, Lauren, or keep going? We'll keep going. All right. After you apply for your permit, our permit offices review the documentation and agree it's time to issue the permit. You will receive a notice from DocuSign to sign the permit. After you sign the permit, you will immediately be redirected to a payment window where you need to pay the initial one-time application fee of 5 cents per foot for longitudinal buried fiber infrastructure installations. So 5 cents per foot for the initial fee. After the one-time initial fee is paid, CDOT will sign that permit, and then the permit becomes an issued permit. Once the permit is issued, work is to be completed in alignment with the terms and the conditions of the issued permit. On January, most permits too also require some type of a notification for a CDOT region contact to make sure that as you're getting ready to start work, the CDOT region is aware that you're out there and working. Like our maintenance teams tend to keep a close eye on this type of activity happening in our right of way. On January 1st of each year, the permittee for longitudinal buried fiber installation permits will be invoiced the annual charge for all fiber installations within our right of way. As I mentioned before, so it'll be one invoice per permittee. If the payment is not made by your entities per the terms and condition, we will hold all additional permits until we can rectify any missing payments for additional fiber installation within our right of way. And then that annual surcharge, it's 10 cents per foot for our urban counties. And those are Adams, Arapahoe, Boulder, Denver, Douglas, El Paso, Jefferson, Larimer, and Weld County. Basically, it's all of our counties that have a population of over 200,000 people. Anything under 200,000 people is considered a rural county, and the annual fee for those is 3 cents per foot.
Julie, do you know if permittees can pay for multiple years up front?
I do not know that question. Bob, do you happen to know?
At this time, no, we're not set up to do multiple years from a permit fee perspective, but if it was like a dark fiber request or something else, yes, we can do prepayment on those type of, but not on the permit side.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
All right, next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about our partnership agreement process, which is basically an unsolicited proposal. So this is the second avenue or a different route you could take if you wanted to install fiber within CDOT's right of way. This does not require paying an initial one-time application fee, and it does not require the annual property use surcharge. However, you will have to go through our permitting processes still. So you still have to submit the application. We still review all the plans. We still review the traffic control plans, the insurance certificate, all of that type of stuff is still required. But this agreement process requires that our partners start by providing CDOT an unsolicited proposal process. In the proposal, there needs to be some level of compensation proposed that equates to the same value CDOT would charge monetarily, though, through the permitting fees that I just discussed. Typically, in-kind infrastructure is proposed, or basically additional access to fiber for CDOT. This process does have a longer time frame because there tends to be more back and forth, and it also still requires you to go through that permitting process. But once you get an agreement in place, you go back to the other diagram that again talks about our permitting process and how to get the permits. This process, though, does allow for some creative solutions. And CDOT is not allowed to direct anybody on what they propose. It's basically a back and forth, but as long as CDOT is getting compensated at the same value that we would through those normal permit fees. So basically, if depending on your timing and how quickly you're needing to move through getting the fiber installed, the fee structure is definitely a faster way to go. But if you have more time and have the option to be more creative, the unsolicited proposal option is definitely still out there. So for the unsolicited proposal, as shown on the diagram, that first step is to submit an unsolicited proposal to CDOT. CDOT will review that proposal and through a committee, approve it. Typically, that process alone takes 1 to 2 months, and it can be very iterative. And if the proposal does not provide enough information for CDOT to move forward. So as long as we have that initial information, we can move forward quickly. Once an unsolicited proposal is approved, the partner will then need to receive one of our state agreement templates. If you're a government entity, you would receive an intergovernmental agreement or IGA template. If you're a private entity, you will receive a master services agreement. Both templates have a very generic scope of services that contemplates the trade for in-kind services or infrastructure for access to CDOT right-of-way. We do allow those partners to redline those state templates. We then review those red lines in detail with our AG's office through our procurement code and with the state controller's office to make sure if CDOT can or cannot accept those red lines. The negotiation process is very dependent on the complexity of the red lines. It can take anywhere from a month if you agree with the template as they are written and provide no red lines, or it can take years, depending on how your legal team will look at the agreement and how complicated those red lines could be. Once we are in agreement with the final draft of the IGA or the Master Services Agreement, CDOT will execute that agreement. And that's what we'll follow from there. We can execute more specific task orders that spell out routes and details of the infrastructure that we will exchange and the right-of-way location that you would be compensating.
Did we lose Julie?
I was wondering if that was me or Julie. We may have lost her for maybe give her just a sec.
Yeah, while we're waiting for her, so my initial thoughts are, I think for BEAD, it seems like the fee structure is the more time efficient process to go through in order to get permitting done quickly and in a way that aligns with the BEAD timeline rather than an in-kind unsolicited proposal that, according to this, could take up to 5 years to process. So that's good information. I'm glad that we're going through this. Any other questions or comments while we're waiting for Julie to hop back on that we can talk through? Initial thoughts from anyone? Brian?
Hey, Jonas, yeah, this is Brian Shepard, the visionary. I had heard, when talking to some folks that have tried the right-of-way, the new procedure, that one of the clauses in the agreement states that all the assets in the right-of-way will revert to the state after 30 years. Can you guys confirm that? And if so, kind of what the thinking behind that is? Because it's kind of a non-starter.
Julie, welcome back. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, not sure what happened. I'm in Poncha and sometimes our internet connectivity is challenging here. In regards to that, I think that is if the agreement itself was not renewed, then all those assets would revert to the state at that point in time. Our Attorney General's office, we're constantly navigating with them how to put agreements in place for perpetuity, and they always have a concern with that. So 30 years was one of the best starting places we could be with them.
Okay, so that is an element within the agreement.
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
that's in there. Yep.
Right, and there is another question in the chat, and Julie, I don't know if you were at a good stopping point. Do you want to take this?
Was because I think the next
Okay.
slide basically is an email address that people can email some additional questions to.
Okay, yeah, I just want to, and this CBO folks can answer this too, but someone asked, would any of the fees be considered as an eligible expense that can be paid for by BEAD funds? So I don't know, Jonas or
Yeah,
Julie.
I did think.
Yeah, so it is. you can get reimbursed through our federal programs for fees. And then also I want to just follow up on what Brian said. The 30 years reversion is pretty typical for government agreements where you're installing infrastructure and right of way, even with franchise agreements with utilities as well. So it's not a new thing in terms of like right of way for government permitting purposes.
All right, thanks, Randy. Someone said they weren't able to see the slides, so I took it off of slideshow. So hopefully you're able to see them all.
Okay.
Let me know if there was a piece specifically that you wanted to see. So
as Brandy said, I mean, the intent of that part of the agreement would definitely, CDOT doesn't want to own any more infrastructure than we already have. We have a hard enough time maintaining what we've got. So it's just a legalese that our Attorney General's office is really after.
okay. Let's see, other questions. I think Julie, you said your portion is done, but I think we can stop for a minute and see if there's any other questions. Yeah, and we will post the slides and send out the recording as well. So all of this will be available. Okay, question in the chat. Where can we find out about the assets already in the right of way?
If you contact the regional offices on CDOT's website, we can definitely provide that information to you as far as what other utilities are already in the right of way that you'd need to work around.
Thanks, Julie. And if anybody has follow up to the question that they put in the chat, please feel free to just speak up, or I'm happy to read chat questions, but you can speak up as well. Okay. Other questions before? Sorry, go ahead. Oh, am I missing a hand raised?
I had a quick question. I don't know if somebody else did. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Kate. And then I think Kurt, you had one too. So Kate, why don't you go first and then we'll go to
Oh,
Kurt.
thank you. Yeah. I was just wondering about the dark fiber the applicants could potentially leverage that CDOT owns. Is there a map of that, or how would applicants know what is even possible in their area that they could potentially request access to?
Hey, Julie, or Kate, it's Bob. We do have a map. We had to pull it down because it was not accessible for the new state laws. So we were getting that converted appropriately. So what we can do is email out maybe a map, or Jonas, maybe through the distro list, maybe you can share one. We'll get one printed and just email everybody that joined today.
Yeah, no problem. Bob, if you and your team want to send over a map that we can send out, I'm sure Lauren and our comms team can make sure everyone receives that.
Yeah, it normally is posted on the CDOT website just because of the accessibility issues with it. Unfortunately, it just couldn't be, it had to be taken down until that gets fixed. So we'll get that out to everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, timely is good. Hoping to get stuff mapped out as soon as possible. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll try to say this week, but it might be next. So we'll do our best.
Okay, great. And it looks like, Kurt, your question was pretty much the same question, right? Any follow-up?
Nope, that answered my question.
Okay, great. Okay, I do not see any other questions in the chat or hands raised. So we can keep going on to CBO's portion, but again, this is a raise your hand anytime webinar, so feel free. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to, I think, Mike Murphy is going to do this.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Michael Murphy. He's from the CBO, also part of our programs team and one of our grant managers. So I'm sure a lot of you have spoken with him already. We've also got Mr. Ollie Hatham from our team, also one of our grant managers. And these two guys are two of our experts at the CBO who you'll be working with the most. So I'm going to turn over to Mr. Michael Murphy, and he's going to go into some details about what to expect on the BEAD application when it comes to CDOT permitting and right-of-way access, and some of the questions that will be asked of our applicants. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Michael Murphy. And Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jonas. I don't know, you're using that expert very loosely. So for the CBO application, so what we wanted to do is give you kind of a little bit of a preview of what the application would look like and when it would apply. Now you'll see that this is a section for permits of all types, whether it be CDOT, National Forest Service, and there's a whole list of different permits available or that apply. Of course, you need to know if it's potential longitudinal, buried, CDOT, right-of-way access, permitting needed. And we'll look at, you need to, like she mentioned before, you need to make sure that you're considering compensation or paying the fee or however you want to do that, and follow the process for unsolicited proposals or the permits, whichever apply. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So when you access the application in the portal, you'll come to section 5.3.1, permitting and critical crossing requirements. And here you will be able to select which ones apply, whether you select bridge crossings, Bureau of Land Management, CDOT, and a whole litany of others that are in this list. If there's one that we don't include in this list, just make sure that you put in the other and let us know what it is. If you go to the next slide, we'll show you what happens when you select yes. So for example, if you select yes on the bridge crossing, it's going to open up a dialog box. And we're looking for quite a bit of information there. As detailed as you can be is better. I think that's probably one of the mantras of this call. The more detail, the better. So just keep that in mind. And then if you select CDOT right-of-way longitudinal, it's going to give you whether you're going to select pay the fee or do the unsolicited proposal with compensation in kind. Again, that's very important, so we know kind of what the time frame looks like and we can kind of adjust and work with you. And if you'll go to the next slide, I'll tell you specifically what we're looking for in those dialog boxes. So the more information is better, of course. We're looking for the permitting entity, the time frame for the submission of the permits, project cost for obtaining permits, because we heard earlier that those are allowable expenses, project cost for, length of time until permits are approved. So that's an anticipated length. We know that that's can't be determined up front because of based on the details and the amount and the complexity of the project. And then any barriers that you may come encounter or that you can think of that may prevent you from getting the permits in time to complete your project. And then, of course, what stage the applicant is in obtaining those. There are several different stages where you're gathering information and you're submitting, or you're at the approval process, or you're at the negotiation process. So we're just trying to get a handle on, as these applications come in, what that workload and what that workflow looks like going forward. And that should be all the slides I have.
Thanks, Mike. There was a question that came in for CDOT team. Will the dark fiber map be provided in a format that's compatible with GIS software? Bob, that might be a question for you, maybe. Oh, well, Bob is joining us from the waiting room, so that's why he's not answering. Hold on just a second. Hi, Bob, are you back? We actually had a question for you.
Yeah, my internet. Speaking of internet, my internet keeps dropping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there was a question that came up that asked if the dark fiber map was going to be provided in a compatible format with GIS software. Like
a KMZ file. I have to look at the effort. We usually had a KMZ file, but we don't have dark fiber everywhere, so it'd have to be on availability. So we could give you a KMZ to import, and then you just have to check to see if there's any available dark fiber on that route with us. We just can't guarantee there's available fibers there.
Yeah, and maybe we can direct people to that email that you guys provided if they have specific requests in terms of file types or something. Okay.
Yeah. Please point them to that email is monitored. And then when you're done with questions, I do have a clarifying point about utilities. So whenever we get to that point.
Yeah, we're actually, CBO is done with our portion and we are open for questions. So Bob, do you want to make that point real quick and then we can see if there's
Yeah,
any-
just clarification earlier about utilities in the right of way and fiber in the right of way. I think the question was pointed more about fiber, and I think we answered that from a CDOT perspective. But just to be very clear, it does not alleviate or replace any SU requirements or 811 that has to take place in the right of way. So just make sure that you're very clear that you still have to do the discovery of the utilities and the proper SU. Which I'm sure you all know that, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Okay, another question. Will there be documentation required? Or is it all a narrative? So yeah, I believe CBO team, right, there will be some uploads required in the application. I don't know if it pertains to permitting, but can anybody elaborate a little bit?
I don't know that there's going to be any CDOT documentation that would be required in the application, especially since a lot of that will be done after the application window. But yes, detailed narratives and any other information that you can provide, if you have it, more is always better. Over communicate your intentions and let us know how we can help and support. And really, the ask is that you be as proactive as possible so that we can all be successful with this.
All right, great, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any others in the chat. Okay. And if there are not any other questions, we will share these slides with everybody, in addition to the recording, like I said, and then any other links or resources that we think might be helpful for you. And I know CBO is always here to answer questions, and we work very closely with CDOT, so we're partners in this, so we can help out with anything. Jonas, any final thoughts or closing words?
No, I think you're spot on, Lauren. The main objective here is that we are all partners in this initiative together, which means that we've all got to be working together, sharing information. So if you have questions, please reach out to either the CBO team, the CDOT team, and let's make sure we're aligned on what these projects look like going forward. Let's be proactive and overcome the challenges that we face together between our stakeholders, CBO and CDOT. Yes, Kate.
Hi there. Sorry, I know we were wrapping up, but I wanted to confirm my understanding. So in order to complete our BEAD application, we will need to have either the unsolicited proposal or the permit application submitted. But according to the comment in the chat, these fees are only reimbursable if it's during a performance period. So how does that, is it just that the application has to be done, but the fees don't necessarily have to be paid upon grant application? Just want to make sure we're really clear on that.
Yeah, so I think that during the application period, I don't know that you'd be ready to pay for the permitting fees at that point. But if you are, then yeah, I would say any documentation that you have that can help move your application along is always going to be better. But to the question about reimbursement, that is correct. It would only be eligible for a reimbursement during that performance period.
Okay, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I thought that if we applied for based on the slides from Julie, if we applied for right of way through CDOT, then we have to pay the fee that would be associated with that mileage at the same time.
So that fee is due when we're ready to actually issue the permit. That fee is not due up front when you first apply for the permit.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. So we can complete our application online prior to submitting without having to pay the fee.
Exactly. We don't collect the fee until after everything has been reviewed, I's dotted, T's crossed, and CDOT thinks we're good to move forward. Then we'll send an invoice for the permit.
Great, thank you.
And
so,
then
as a quick follow-up to that, so what CDOT is looking for is for the applicants to have already started the permitting process, just not that everything is signed off and the fees are paid. So you're expecting people to have already started the process before the application period?
So are we talking about a BEAD application or a permit application?
Sorry, the BEAD application. So I guess my question is, do you need to come into the BEAD application with a plan to get a permit, or do you need to come into the BEAD application with your permit kind of already underway?
So yeah, I think what we need to see is that you've got a plan in place. Based on the project that you are applying for, you should have an idea whether or not CDOT's going to be involved. If you think they're going to be involved, you should know, how do you plan on compensating them? Are you planning on going through the fee structure and getting a permit up front? Or do you think you're going to do an in-kind compensation, and that's going to require an unsolicited proposal and an MSA agreement with CDOT? Those are kind of the things that we're looking for when you apply for BEAD. How are you going to compensate them? And then number two, what kind of information do you have as far as where those crossings, or I'm sorry, longitudinal buried fiber will be as far as in the right of way? So as much information that you have up front is going to be better, but we do not expect you to have applied for permits or have an executed agreement with CDOT when you apply for BEAD. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
And then the question on SUE, the underground utility permitting requirements. So those are not additional permits. What CDOT requires due to legislation, the SUE legislation, basically we require certain levels of identification of all the underground utilities that are in the area where you're going to be working. So it's not an additional permit. It's just something we look at as we're reviewing the plans part of your application.
All right, thanks, Julie. Follow up to the Sue comment. It looks like there's some comments coming back to the topic we were talking about before, so I'm gonna make sure we wrap up the Sue permit conversation real quick. If so, then Jonas, you might want to see Kate, you have your hand raised. We might need to clarify what it says in the grant guidelines, but Kate, go ahead if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I just wanted what you just said is not what's in the grant guidelines. So I just wanted to, again, just get really clear. The grant guidelines says that we must submit to CDOT and upload that as part of our application for the BEAD program.
And that's correct. So the grant guidelines are correct in that if you have made that determination that you're going to compensate CDOT through an in-kind and you're going to go the unsolicited proposal route, then we would like you to have submitted that unsolicited proposal to CDOT and send us a copy with your BEAD application.
Okay, so, but what if it says if CDOT ROW is required, an unsolicited proposal should be submitted? What if a CDOT ROW is required, but we're just going to do the permit? That, I guess,
if you're just going to do the permit and you're going to pay the fee structure, then we will not need an unsolicited proposal, and neither will CDOT.
Okay, so is the idea behind this to understand what the budgeting is for this?
That's part of it. Yeah, we expect to know, number one, what's going to be required on the timing side. For us, for the CBO, what's important for us to know is, are you thinking about entering into what potentially could be a 5-year negotiation process with CDOT? Because if so, that's going to weigh on whether or not you're going to have a successful application. And yeah, I think to Brandy's point, we need to know what your free budget in your grant application is going to look like.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Again, for us, it's a timing issue. If you're going to pay the fee structure, you could have a permit in 3 to 4 months. It's really helpful for us to know that up front, rather than you're going to enter into an agreement and negotiate with CDOT, which could take up to 5 years.
And Jed made a comment that we're updating the grant guidelines to make that really clear. So that's coming. But thank you for those questions. I think they're really good to clarify.
chime back in, I think Brandy's comment is uploaded application approval contract. So if we can just get clarity in those grant guidelines of, because no matter what, there's an application. If we pay fees or if we're doing unsolicited, we still have to submit an application. So is that application, no matter what, do it at the time we submit to the CBO, or because that is a little different than what I just heard Jonas say around that. No, if we're just paying the fees, we don't have to submit that. So we don't have to answer it now, but if we can just get really clear in the grant guidelines, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we're definitely uploading, I'm sorry, we are modifying that language to be more clear. And yeah, Brandy, that will be updated tomorrow with those grant guidelines when they are published. But again, unsolicited proposal and application for permitting, two different things. So if you're doing an unsolicited proposal, we do expect you to submit that with your BEAD application. But if you're doing a fee structure and permitting directly with CDOT, there would not be an unsolicited proposal. The permitting will happen. You don't need to apply for the permitting to apply for the BEAD application. That the permitting would happen later by the time of contract execution for BEAD.
Okay. A couple more things have come into the chat. I knew you guys had more questions. Let's see. One comment, the permit application to CDOT needs to be clear that you are interested in paying the fee or you are going the path of the unsolicited proposal. Okay, so I think that was a follow-up, just confirmation to this conversation we're having. Okay. And then Rob put some information about the SUE permit. So that is in there. Rob, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand. I think the link I put in there didn't work, so I'm going to try a different one. But there's a best practices for subsurface utility engineering and when it's required. So you can look at the best practices document that's published by the Underground Damage Safety Commission if there's any questions on that, because I do think majority of the projects will probably fit within that state statute. So just be aware of that and what's required for that. But just wanted to give people more information around that. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Any more questions? I know it takes a minute to think too about some of what's on your mind, but you can give it another few seconds to see if there's anything else that comes up. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Okay. Looks like nothing else is on your mind. And if there is anything or something later, please contact us. So here's the emails for the two offices for this program. And then you can contact the CBO anyway, anytime, the programs team, Jonas's team. They're there to help individually as well. So if there are no other questions, I think we can wrap up and say thank you to everybody. We appreciate your time.